Hello and welcome to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. Today is Thursday, October the 1st of 2015. I am your host, Leon Wolf, and we are delighted that you have decided to join us tonight. I want to welcome, first of all, my regular panel of co-hosts. We have, of course, Jeff Blehar of the Ace of Spades Decision Desk, F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon, and Becket Adams of the Washington Examiner, filling in for Neal doing on sabbatical. Glad to have you guys back with us as always. Caleb Howe is going to be filling in the producing chair and also filling in for Scott Lincicome, who also has to take a leave of absence because we all smell funny. So, Caleb, glad to have you with us. And our guest for tonight is Jon Gabriel of Ricochet. You know him on Twitter as X-Jon. Jon, thanks for joining the show tonight, and congratulations on your new gig. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your new job starting today?
I just began as the editor-in-chief at ricochet.com, so give us a visit over there.
All right, sounds great. Well, we're going to jump right into the news of the day. Of course, we have the horrible news out of Oregon that we're still trying to make some sense of, and so we want to, of course, issue the caveat before we begin talking about this, that we're still a little bit of fog of war kind of over this entire situation, and we're not entirely sure of all the facts of what's going on. But so without talking too much about the specifics of the facts, I do want to talk a little bit about the way that the media is already covering this story. And Jon, as the guest, we're going to go to you first. You know, I think that we've seen kind of the way that these things play out is that there always seems to be, anytime there's a story like this, a concerted media effort to place this within the context of gun control. How would you rate the media's coverage of this so far, at least within that context, as compared to the other stories that have come out this year, Roanoke and so forth?
From the coverage that I saw, it seems quite typical. They're just going through their normal narrative, just talking about how he got guns. I think it was kind of sad, and it's kind of breaking on Twitter now. The President Obama, in his statement, instructed the press that was gathered there, hey, make sure you put a side-by-side chart of how many deaths of Americans have been caused by terrorists in the past 10 years versus deaths by guns, and run that in your news reports. And almost immediately, Vox.com, our friends at Vox.com, have dutifully reported precisely as he directed. So again, they're going to try gun control. The kind of strange thing politically, though, is when Obama rused the backward Americans and their love of clinging to their guns, he offers no plans. He just basically, he comes out and gives a statement. It's good that he's saying, hey, I'm sad, we're there for the families, but then, and it seems like every time it's a little more bitter, it's a little more angry, complains about the GOP Congress, complains about NRA, complains about gun owners who are afraid that he's going to confiscate weapons, and then he immediately praises Australia, which confiscated weapons after a mass shooting. So I think the press is just going to run with their normal issue, pushing gun control again. Politically, I don't see how that helps the Democrats, though. They keep running into this box canyon, and it's not helping when a gun-free zone is unfortunately and tragically shot up like this.
So, Caleb, you had a story at Truth or Revolt this afternoon, and of course we're dealing with unconfirmed reports, but there seemed to be some indication that the shooter was singling people out on the basis of their religion, specifically on the basis of Christianity. Talk a little bit about, kind of the facts that we know now, or at least the allegations that we know now, and what the sources of them are, and how that might serve to change the coverage of this story as it goes forward.
Right. Well, it started with a local newspaper in the area who reported the eyewitness account from someone who's in the room. And what they said was that the shooter was demanding that everyone stand up and state what religion they were. Then separately, another person on Twitter confirmed this, saying that her grandmother had just returned, who had also been in the room. She said the same thing. They were told to stand up and say what religion they were. After that happened, the shooter, according to this person, then shot everyone who had answered Christian in the head and everyone who had answered otherwise in the legs. So you can find the reports. The Twitter one you can find it just about anywhere. Fox Business, Huffington Post, a lot of other places. And I can't remember the username, but the eyewitness was Courtney Moore, and she was quoted by the News Review, which is in Douglas County where the shooting took place. And of course, the speculation that we've seen amongst our friends and co-workers and colleagues around the internet is that fact alone, should it prove to be true, will almost guarantee the story being buried by the national media.
So Becket,
I don't know that I agree with that.
well, why not? What's your take on it if it turns out to be true?
If that turns out to be the case, I just don't. I think it's too late to bury that. I think it's too late. The story's already too big, and it's more important to them to talk about gun control than it is to cover up any religious motive.
So Becket, let's go to you on this. And there was a poll that came out just a couple of weeks ago, in fact, that showed that Gallup has been polling. You know, they tend to do these question polls that go on for years and years and years, and they track them over time. One of the questions that they tracked over time is, do you think that it's too easy in America to buy a gun? For the last 20-something consecutive years, the answer has been over 50% yes, between 50 and 60% yes. And here, like this last month, in fact, after the Roanoke shooting, was the first time in well over 2 decades that fell below 50%. The yes, it's too easy to buy a gun in America. Now more than 50% says it's either just right or it's not easy enough. So clearly, what the gun control advocates are trying to do with these stories is not working. So I guess the question is, why do they continue doing it?
Well, I think on the face of it, the question itself is a pretty silly one. I mean, they would have to make sure that the people who are being asked in this poll actually understand what goes into getting a gun. I mean, it would be like doing a poll and asking people, is it hard to pass the Ohio State bar? And then asking people who have actually never trained to be a lawyer in their life. I mean, who cares if I say yes? I have no idea. Likewise, how many of these respondents even know what it's like to get a gun?
But that goes to what they're attempting to do, which is to create the narrative that it is too easy in America. Regardless of whether that's true or not, that's what they're trying.
Right. So I'm saying, on the face of it, the question is a silly one, but I would agree that the idea is to build up this overarching narrative or theme that guns are too easy to access. You actually have people like the President of the United States say it's easier to buy groceries or it's harder to buy groceries and have access to food than it is to get a gun in the United States, which is complete falsehood. It's on its face. But the idea is to make it sound like there are guns poking out from underneath everyone's bed, making people scared of guns. That's the idea. And you have tragedies like this, which are awful. And again, I don't really like commenting on stuff like this, especially within the first 24 hours of it happening. But just from watching the initial reaction from the American commentariat, from op-ed writers to reporters, it seems like we've really streamlined the process of going right from shooting to talking about what caused it and defending the supposed things that have caused it. And to me, it gets more depressing each time.
Well, and I think that there's something to that, and I'm going to go to Jeff, or Jeff's Penguin that he has there for some further commentary on this. I think that reaction is part of what is driving a lot of the backlash, don't you, Jeff? I mean, look, it's not the case that when one of these shootings happen that the NRA is out there saying guns are fine. It's always, immediately the gun control advocates leap out in front of the camera before the body's even in the ground, and I think the American people find that distasteful, to some degree, and that might be some of what is causing this reaction. And I just don't understand why the folks who are on this side can't at least wait, 24 to 48 hours, let the family grieve before they start this, parade every time. You think there's something to that?
Yeah, I think there is. I find the entire thing disgusting, and that is sort of the secret subtext behind my Penguin thing. If you noticed, just like I did last time when we had that horrible scenario where the two, journalists were shot on live TV by the crazy former employee, I just literally at a certain point I threw my hands up. I just said fuck it, and I just started posting animal photos because I'm like, you know what, all the commentary that comes across the wire, especially on places like Twitter, which is immediate and ephemeral, it's just so stupid. I just changed my avatar to everybody's talking about gun control on the internet, but lol, nothing matters, because that's really the truth. Nothing matters. This is all pointless venting. The people who can't resist it and just start shooting off at the mouth immediately after tragedies like this take place do so because I think two reasons. One, because they have no internal filters. They don't have everything is there to be politicized. Just like, God help me, the President of the United States actually came out and said this afternoon, oh, we should politicize these tragedies. Well, thanks, President Obama. You've just validated the rather grotesque behavior of a whole host of internet denizens. But moreover, beyond that, if nothing else, the reaction after Sandy Hook when President Obama was at his strongest right after being reelected, with an increased majority in the Senate for nothing, no less, taught us that nothing is going to happen here. Nothing should happen here, obviously. I think we're all on the same page with regards to, gun control legislation. But nothing is going to happen here regardless. This is all just pointless venting. And I was talking with someone today. I won't mention their name, but they're very kind of well-known, famous, and well-respected in sort of viral news media, and they have a big name in that. And they said something to me that I thought was really, really interesting, which is basically that all of the tweets, everything that you see on Twitter reacting to gun control issues after one of these mass shootings, literally people are out there very cynically tweeting simply to drive up their own follower counts, to get clicks, retweets, favorites, to make a name, to get out there, to get exposed. There's a lot of self-aggrandizement. There's a lot of attention whoring involved in the whole business, and I think it's just a cynical grotesquerie. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to get done. In this case, nothing should get done, and it's one of the reasons why I sort of refused to participate in it last time, this time, and the next time, for that matter.
Sorry, I was muted. There we go. Bill, let me go to you here, and I have a theory. You can just agree or disagree with this theory. The media is accused of being liberal, which I think they are, but I think that kind of oversimplifies the statement about it. I mean, there are people who are kind of conservative to libertarian in the news media about a lot of things. I think that there are two things, though, that the media is way more liberal, not just in the American public, but then even standard issue liberals. And I think that those two issues, number one, are abortion. Even a lot of the conservatives you find in the media, like George Will and Charles Krauthammer, have very not orthodox pro-life views.
Well, no, but Will's pro-life because of his Down syndrome son. Yeah.
Right, but you get into stuff like embryonic stem cell research and things like that. They tend to go off the rails. But I mean, even folks like John Stossel are going to be pro-choice and so forth and so on. But the other issue, I think, is gun control. And I think that even a lot of the folks that are fairly middle of the road in the media are pro-gun control, which I think is probably the issue that they're most out of step with America on, which I think is mostly on the side of the NRA folks. Do you think that's a fair characterization?
No, not particularly. So you said I could agree or disagree. I do best with yes or no questions on talk show platforms, so I'm going to go with a no.
You don't think that...
And we lost Becket. Becket resigned in protest. No, I guess I disagree with the premise that they're out of lockstep with the American people here. And I know these polls are always loaded and everything like that, but I will say that the average American doesn't care much for AR-15s. The average person who cares about guns cares about AR-15s. The average person has an approach to guns the same way the average person has an approach to abortion, which is, yeah, I don't really like to think about it, but I guess the option should be there. There's not this principled, belief in it. And I guess I would agree in the sense that the media is true believers on gun control and being pro-abortion, where the rest of the country is just unthinkingly approving of both. And I guess that's how I would characterize the media here.
I guess I just, for me, I watched CNN pretty much uninterrupted while I was awake for the 2 or 3 days after the Roanoke shooting. And, I know, Caleb, you were watching kind of the same coverage. And they had just an uninterrupted stream of folks who were talking gun control. And they had, so you remember in Roanoke there were 2 people who were tragically shot. And the female reporter, her dad was in front of the camera basically every hour, twice an hour, talking about how he was going to be on the crusade against gun control. The cameraman...
You mean for gun control?
He was for gun control, right. The cameraman's dad was on once, and he said, well, I don't know that gun control would have helped here. Seems like this guy bought a gun legally and passed a background check and was never heard from again. You never heard from a single other person I never saw in that entire basically week-long blitz that they did who said, you're talking about a solution that wouldn't do any good.
Yeah, it's kind of like how when MSNBC brought on the mother of the stillborn in the CMP videos, and she revealed herself to be pro-life, and somehow she is not on any of the TV stations this morning. weird that CNN bookers aren't trying to bring her on anymore, and weird that Jessica Valenti, who was passionately saying, hey, I can't believe they exploited this poor woman, stop that as soon as the clip was brought to her attention. So, yeah, I guess I could agree with you there with Roanoke.
Well,
Yeah,
it's the Cindy Sheehan effect. I mean, when Cindy Sheehan talks, she has moral authority. When a mother talks that feels the other way, that my son, fought and died for the United States of America, then that person is politicizing their child's death. So that's how the media works.
I think that's a fair characterization. Let's move on to our second topic. Get Jon back in the discussion. Of course, we've all watched with kind of growing alarm the situation in Syria and Russia's involvement therein. And I think that what's disturbing to me is that the Obama administration seems to be just as alarmed as any of the rest of us. What does it say that they appear to have been caught as flat-footed as the media, apparently, at the swiftness and the strength of Russia's response there in Syria?
Well, I think what's really concerning, too, about what Putin did is the first attacks that he carried out were against our quote-unquote moderate Assad opposition. Apparently those are the first people he hit. He didn't spend a few weeks hitting ISIS positions to kind of, oops, we accidentally hit some pro-U.S. forces. No, he just led with that. So it just shows once again that the world, they aren't afraid of Obama, they don't respect him, they don't much care for his opinion, and any time that they can tweak him publicly or privately, they're going to do that. And we see that with China building the islands in the South China Sea. We already saw it with Putin and how he's making so many threats throughout Eastern Europe, not just Ukraine, seeing it with Iran repeatedly. It's just endless with them. They have no respect, and all of the bad actors in the world know that they have another year plus to sow any mischief they want to sow without any kind of repercussions. I would think even if someone like Hillary was elected, just her personal pique would be enough to say, hey, we have to respond because they offended me personally. But with Obama, he just seems not to care at all. He's so terrified of standing up to anybody unless they happen to be Bibi Netanyahu giving a speech at the UN where he didn't even send a representative to watch the speech. Anybody who is a sworn ally of ours or a sworn enemy of ours, he's fine with just letting them run roughshod over him.
Yeah, and what do you make of this bizarre, I'm going to stay with you, Jon, what do you make of this bizarre kind of statement by Josh Earnest this afternoon where, basically, Putin spits in Obama's face by, militarily attacking the people that we're backing over there in Syria, and he says, oh, well, what this really means is it's a sign of weakness on Russia's part. I mean, what kind of, how do you even get your mind around a view like that that the White House is expressing here?
Yeah, it's like he's the Zen master or something. Oh no, strength is weakness, and weakness is strength. I think that's kind of how they have to spin it because they know nothing's going to change, nothing's going to happen. They seemingly just have absolutely no answer because Obama, when he pulled the troops out of Iraq and started pulling them out of Afghanistan, he tends to view the promises that he gave when he was first elected as a checklist. And one was, they want me to solve Iraq. Okay, it's checked off. I don't need to deal with that anymore. It's done. It's like, no, things aren't ever done. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. Something else will pop up. But he's terrified to send even a token force of troops in there to respond for, obviously that would spin into something greater. So they're just going to, basically, Josh Earnest's job is to tread water for the next year and a half until he's out, and then complain about the next president who is left with this nightmare to deal with all over the world. Just blame him for, sowing war or whatever complaints you're going to have.
Becket, let me go to you and let me ask you if you can to play devil's advocate here, okay, if you can. Is there an argument to be made that Putin is actually right on the merits, that Assad is in a better position to deal with ISIS than the rebels that we're currently backing in Syria?
Well, I think there have been a lot of reports that have correctly stated that it's not that the U.S.-backed allies over in Syria are poorly trained, it's that there are very few of them. What was the number we had? It was somewhere around $300 million US. 500 million US dollars have been poured in to train a number of allies that you could count on one hand. Could you make the argument that Assad is in a better place to do it? I mean, he's on the ground, he's familiar with the terrain, but do you want to leave that sort of duty to a madman who's already killed off so many thousands of people? And this is kind of the other argument that we see as we've been watching a lot of this stuff unfold in
Well,
the Middle
of course,
East
from
and the rest
Russia's
of the
point
world.
of view, they don't give a crap about that, right? I mean,
Yeah,
they care only about the crap that comes up from the Caucasus to affect them personally.
Right, and the other point, too, that's been made repeatedly is that the more that we back away and just kind of sit on our hands while Putin and the rest of them move forward, is that we are effectively abdicating our power or authority or influence throughout the world. You're going to see the rest of the neighbors in this area, whether it's Egypt, Saudi Arabia, any of them are going to start turning to people like Syria and Russia because they know the U.S. is neutered and won't do a damn thing about it. And any of our allies that might be able to do anything about it are sitting around, I think, most of them, and waiting for us to make a move, but we're just not doing it. So we're in this situation where we look on the world stage, I believe, to be ineffective, and people are now, and there's a power vacuum, as there always is, and people are looking towards people like Putin and Assad to answer that call, which is terrifying, frankly.
It is terrifying, and let me go to Caleb here, because I mean, look, for all that we've kind of made fun of the posture of weakness that we have over there, I mean, how can Obama not respond to this? I mean, Putin's forces are not attacking ISIS; they're directly attacking instead the rebels that we're backing. I mean, it's everything but an open declaration of war on our interests in the region. I mean, how can Obama do anything but respond with military force against the Russians? And I know that the argument is that he's Obama, and so therefore he won't. But
I was just going to say that you're going to have to define respond, because I think when he said yesterday, and Josh Earnest said yesterday, and they put out all their different spokespeople yesterday saying that, well, Russia's doing this from a position of weakness, something Josh Earnest repeated again today, that they're jealous of America's economy, that they're losing money in the Middle East, and that this is just a weak move on their part. I think that they see that as a response. I think that Obama, like, literally believes that somewhere in Russia, people are like, oh man, our economy is not that good, and they called us out. This is terrible. We're not going to be able to eat lunch at the cool table today. So I mean, surely he's going to continue that kind of response. How can he not respond militarily? I think that you said the answer, the one you don't believe, because he's Obama.
I mean, and I guess, if we go to Jeff here, I mean, this is the closest situation that we've had. And, Jeff, you and I were, old enough to live through at least part of the Cold War, where every conflict potentially raised the specter of us getting in some sort of military conflict directly with the Russian military by proxy. This is the closest we've come to actually facing them down directly, our forces against theirs. I mean, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is if there was any real face-off. I mean, here's the fact.
If there were any other president than the one we have.
Right. There was. I can't believe that this is a cartoon that was published in the New York Times, but you may have seen it. It was a political cartoon published in yesterday's New York Times that showed, there was like a leader of the free world space, a rostrum at the United Nations, and Putin is the man sitting behind it, and Obama is just standing there looking at him, and Putin was saying, "Hey, this chair was empty. I took it." Which is pretty much the way you have to look at what has happened. This is the final denouement of 7 years of Barack Obama's foreign policy agenda. He has completely ceded our role. The most upsetting part about what's currently going on in Syria is not the fact that Russia is intervening. They would have been expected to get involved here, given that they have a naval base at Tartus, and it's their only, in fact, outlet on the Mediterranean for their fleet. But the fact that they're getting involved there and also extending their feelers to the other regimes in the region that we used to be the hegemon for, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, they're talking essentially to all of these other Middle Eastern regimes saying, hey, the United States is an unreliable partner now. You can't trust them. You can't, certainly, you're 16 more months of this crap from coming from Barack Obama. Are you gonna put your chits in his corner? No. How about us? We will back our rhetoric up with fighting, men, materiel, airplanes, bombs, guns, blood, and treasure. And that is a very powerful argument, particularly in the Middle East, where the inclination is to not go with people who share any kind of ideals. They don't have democratic ideals. They're going to go for the strong horse. Russia, a country that is to this day, people don't really realize just how structurally weak Russia is in many ways. Their force projection capabilities are significantly reduced from the era of the USSR. But they are playing the strong horse in the Middle East, and it's an inconceivable outcome that I literally could not have imagined that I would live to see it happen so rapidly, and I do not think it's something we're going to recover from very quickly.
So, Bill,
can I add to that, Leon?
Yeah,
go ahead.
please.
I was just going to say, I think we talked about 2 weeks ago on the show when I was on the previous time. We talked about how in the Middle East, the one thing they feared the most before President Obama was elected was a weakened United States presence in the Middle East. That's how they understand how to interact. That's how that region understands how to interact with an outside stabilizing force. And if we can't be that force, then someone else will.
So Bill, let me go to you on this. And it's not just us who are raising the alarm over what Russia is doing. I mean, look, Germany has face to save here, along with a lot of other kind of European powers who've taken a more or less hands-off approach militarily, but have spoken strongly in favor of essentially what our plan is over there and against Assad remaining in power. Really, the only chance I see of us, upping our military intervention in the area is if we have a lot of Europeans going along with us. What do you think the chances of that occurring are as we look at kind of the rhetoric that's been ramping up now, not only from Germany but from a lot of the other European nations?
Well, the Europeans have been coasting off of us. I love how we singled out the Middle Eastern countries as a people and a culture that looks for an outside stabilizing force. That's exactly been the model for all of Western Europe too, is we can neglect our military, we can neglect sending more than a few obese German soldiers into Afghanistan for this coalition, and the U.S. will always protect us. Now I don't see them, especially with the euro faltering and potential systemic a systemic landslide coming in the face of the potential disintegration that results from the Greek exit, from the fact that they're taking on a humanitarian crisis and a population influx that's coming at the worst time possible.
But they don't have to.
I mean, I don't see them actually making a difference in terms of putting force into the region because they just don't have the political will or the economic capital to sustain this sort of thing. Whereas for Russia, like Jeff was saying, these guys have demographics that are pointing toward economic decline. They have gas prices that are absolutely killing them, and if we start exporting LNG, they lose their number one moneymaker. I mean, this is a power, an aspiring world power that knows that if it doesn't make this push now and it doesn't act now, it's going to be in trouble within the decade. So that's why I see Russia taking action, whereas other European countries really aren't going to. I mean, has France really recovered from the abomination that was its actions in Libya? Not really.
Sure, but
do you mean Libya or do you mean Algeria?
Yeah, Algeria.
Sorry.
So, but and Caleb, you're saying this in the chat, and I think this is an important point. Germany and France and all these, they don't have to put forth an actual force that actually does crap. They just have to provide Obama with an ass covering to say it's not the United States against Russia, it's all of us, it's me and my buddies against Russia, right? I mean, they can send some token force of 1,000 people who, God knows if they even have bullets in their guns, and that might be enough for his purposes, correct?
Right, but I mean, you have to add to that a token force also seems to be good enough for him when we're talking about American forces.
True story. All right, let's move on and talk about the ongoing and getting worse Clinton email dumpster fire. We keep coming back to this because it keeps getting worse and worse, unbelievably. I keep thinking that this story is going to run out of steam, and instead it continues to just get worse for Camp Hillary. John, more and more of these emails are coming out now that are marked classified. I mean, it's becoming almost an embarrassment, the defense that I didn't send or receive any classified information over this email. assess, if you will, I mean, the potential. I mean, look, how much longer is this story going to go on? I mean, how many more weeks are we going to be talking about this kind of constant slow bleed of the story? Is there something that's going to happen that's going to kind of finally put the pin in Hillary in terms of this story and how it's unfolding in the media?
Well, I think the story is just going to go on as long as Hillary stays in this thing. She's stonewalled so much every step of the way, and she's like, well, that worked for Bill, it'll work for me, but this isn't an errant fling with an intern. This is just a drip, drip, drip of major national security issues, one after another after another. And it's pretty obvious the American people don't trust her, Democrats don't trust her. And you have Bernie breathing down her neck. Now Biden is, every week he seems a little bit closer to jumping in as well. It's kind of sad. If you had told me a year ago the savior of the Democratic Party was Joe Biden, no one would have believed it. Everybody was insisting Hillary was inevitable. But it's looking more and more like he might be the placeholder for them, at least. Another 70-year-old white person running for the ticket again. The thing that I've actually enjoyed most, obviously the security issues are very concerning, but all the treacly suck-up advisors that she has, just constantly buttering her up and say, oh, you're so wise, Hillary, you had such a great appearance, and the reporters sucking up to her as well. I think that is getting more and more entertaining and will continue to be. It's just this endless fountain of scandal and entertainment, and I don't see how it ends as long as she stays in the race.
No, I just like to point out, I changed my mind about this. I used to think that the drip drip narrative was a good one and would be politically beneficial. That once we started, once we kept this as a simmering low burn, that it would end up hurting Hillary politically throughout the race. It would dog her throughout, and eventually bring down the candidacy. I don't see that happening anymore. I think the John Podhoretz wrote a very convincing article over in the New York Post about how the drip drip strategy and the staggered release of this information is actually designed to help Hillary survive this, because we are grasping at straws every single time. We're the four blind men touching the elephant, and the elephant is the enormity of this crisis. But every single time there's a new release, there's a different angle to take. One week it's classified information, the other week it's Huma and her role at the foundation. Then it's Sid Blumenthal. There are all these different ways to go when you just have a limited number of 10,000 emails to go, but none of us have the big comprehensive package to actually study and get to the bottom of the larger issue here. And the larger issue would prove damning, but the second that we spend every single time, we're all chasing, these various little angles, it doesn't give us the opportunity to synthesize it to the American people. And if we can't synthesize a scandal about metadata and email and classified information, which in its own nature is hard to sell to the average American person, there's no way this scandal is really going to dog her that much going into the general election.
Can I just say that there is one way that the scandal could conceivably put a pin in Hillary, and it's not going to happen. But the one way it could is if word leaked that the FBI had recommended charges be filed against her for, you name your statute. That is conceivably possible that would happen. What will never happen is the Justice Department agreeing to file those charges. That's just not going to happen. But if it doesn't, there's an arguable narrative here where they make the recommendation, Justice Department ignores it, then it turns into a leak war. That could, if not force Hillary out of the race, damage her so much that she becomes seriously threatened by Bernie Sanders in a way that she still, in my opinion, is not. Or Biden, for that matter. Biden is not running unless. You were saying, Leon? You were saying?
I know. I think it's an easier sell than Bill is, getting on. I mean, I think that another scenario that could unfold in terms of facts.
Synthesize it for me. Give me the 8-second soundbite, short of the Hail Mary pass that the FBI actually recommends that the Democratic frontrunner is charged with, a felony. So in 8 seconds.
It's very simple. It's very simple. She sent highly classified information over an insecure server.
Okay.
I gave you 4 seconds to
Move me.
Yeah, but you know what? That doesn't sound really like.
Move me.
Oh my God, let's murder.
Then I just downplay like they've been doing and say, hey, everything gets classified here anyway.
Just go back a few
it's
years.
just a speech.
What they said about Valerie Plame. What they said about outing Valerie Plame. Just copy and paste that.
Yeah, but that would have to be a narrative carried by the media. Is the media going to carry that narrative?
No, because we don't. It's not bullshit in this case because we actually know one of the things that we actually know was a damn map of the North Korean nuclear program was sent over this. It's not trivial information, and that's just one small piece of what we've already uncovered. I mean,
who publicizes this, Leon?
A small piece. A small piece. If that piece came out in one big leak, and we could actually get down to specifics right away, then editorial boards across the country start writing about it. That's when a narrative catches on, when we can all see the big picture all at once.
Leon,
but we're not seeing that right now.
Leon, nothing happens unless the media tells you it happens. If only the conservative media pushes it, it didn't exist. We know this. It's grim and it's awful. Hey, look at the Planned Parenthood videos, right? The American public is completely ignorant of them for the most part, despite the fact that we here on the right have been in high dudgeon about them for the better part of 5 months at this point. Why? Because the media doesn't want to talk about them. The media does at this point feel like talking about Hillary's emails because they just don't like her. But they can immediately put a tap on that, spike it anytime they wish, and they still control it. Yeah, the second it becomes the general election, in other words. They want a race in the primary, so they'll let it go for now, but they'll unite, as they always do, behind the Democrat when the time.
Hey, listen, I appreciate your pessimism. I'm a natural conservative just like you guys, but, I mean, it's hurting Hillary not just in her polling numbers against Bernie, but in her general election numbers as well against the expected Republican field. Becket, feel free to jump in, and John, feel free to jump in anytime.
One thing that I wanted to say that one big thing that you got to keep in mind is Obama doesn't like Hillary. All these leaks are coming out. I think he's behind at least a few of them, and he's the guy in charge of the FBI. He has a lot of cards he can play in this, and if he doesn't get the feeling that Hillary is going to rubber stamp what he did to cement his legacy, it's Biden all the time for him.
Right, and I think to that point, Bill makes. I agree more or less with Bill. I'm not going to sit here and argue that what she did isn't extremely, as they say, problematic or controversial, but average American doesn't know what metadata is or give a shit even if they did know what it is. Average American can barely tell you who the first 2 presidents were, let alone...
Average American, though, can understand that a map of North Korean nuclear sites should not be sent over an unsecure server that might get hacked.
How many Americans are worried about North Korea in general?
How many of them can point it out on a fucking map of Korea?
You want to, regardless of how they can figure that stuff out, they understand the principle that's involved. And look, guys.
There's so many.
Do you think that would keep them from voting for her?
I think it might. And I think that, if you look at Hillary's polling numbers and you look at the stuff that's not just, how does she do against so on and so forth, the stuff about, the word cloud that comes up, the words you think about Hillary, the stuff about being a liar and mistrustworthy, it's hurting her. I'm surprised as anyone that it is, but I think that it's hurting her standing and her favorability in the polls. I mean, there's a reason.
And I agree with that, but as was stated earlier this evening on the show, I think that's only because a board media wants an exciting primary debate. They want an exciting primary race. Once the reporters and columnists coalesce and get behind who they think the Democratic nominee will be, they will stop talking about it. The public at large will forget about it, and they'll move on. And this, like Jeff was saying, I think this is rightly expressed by what we're seeing with the Planned Parenthood thing. Planned Parenthood should be a major scandal. It's being sat on. Average American doesn't know much what's going on. And then if I could add just to the pessimism, because we don't have enough here this evening, I mean, after watching the disastrous GOP hearing, that I think was the final nail in the Planned Parenthood scandal. It's not going anywhere. Nothing's happening. Planned Parenthood is here to stay, like the IRS, because the public doesn't know, and the public doesn't care.
We're going to talk about them screwing the pooch on that here in this next topic. So we're going to put a pin in that for later. We're going to put a pin in that for later. But let me.
Modern man doesn't pin his tweets.
Let me. Oh my God, we are not going
By
to
the
talk
way,
about that alcohol on this show.
thanks for waiting to talk about the Planned Parenthood thing till I'm super drunk. That's great.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to make sure it was interesting, right?
Well, let me put it to you this way, and anybody can chime in to this in agreement or disagreement if they want. I think that the difference maker with respect to this scandal is going to be that I feel more confident every day that Hillary's opponent in the general election is going to be Marco Rubio. And I think that he has a talent, and I've said this at Red State, he has a talent that I have not yet seen since Reagan to carry a narrative without the media's help. In a short amount of time on screen, he can say in 15 or 20 seconds something that punches people in the gut and makes them remember, and I think that he'll be able to break through that haze, even if the media no longer wants to carry the story in a way that it might hurt Hillary. So,
Leon, did you see Rubio talking about Black Lives Matter the other day?
I did. It was great. I loved it.
That was exactly what I thought of when you said that. It's the only candidate in the Republican race I have ever seen talk about that subject in a way that remained conservative, in a way that any normal conservative can understand and recognize, and yet it suggested empathy. It was real. It didn't sound scripted. I literally had to go show it to my friends because I was so just kind of like, yeah, this is a natural talent, and I really do think if cross your fingers, if we're smart enough to nominate this guy, he is our best shot.
And Jeff, it just in case you didn't miss it, it's actually having an effect to the Black Lives Matter activist, the big one, DeRay, has actually reached out to Rubio's people and wants a meeting with him. I mean, that to me seems like a pretty big deal.
All right. Anybody else got anything they want to chip in on this topic?
Seth Rogen made sure Americans know all about North Korea.
There you go. That's his one service to the Republic. Definitely not any of his acting career. All right, so let's move on.
Oh, you're such an old fuddy-duddy.
Superbad.
Okay, he's not funny.
He wrote Superbad.
Well, okay, he might be funny as a writer. He's not funny as an actor. I just don't get his.
You really didn't like Knocked Up? Not at all? Come on.
I didn't.
You're dead inside, Leon. God.
Leon, how can you not like Knocked Up? You
no, I agree.
For the baby.
No, I agree.
It's a pro-life film,
It's
Leon.
a pro-life.
You have no soul.
I absolutely like it.
That was awful.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that it was great as a pro-life movie. The Island was a pro-life movie, also not a good movie on the merits. That's all I'm saying.
I just want to say that Becket is right. Juno is awful.
Juno is unbearable. Juno is unbearably awful.
Yes.
Fuck that film and fuck its stupid hamburger phone. I never want to see it again.
All right, so let's talk about the Planned Parenthood hearings / shit show. Well, let me not prejudice John's remarks because he's going to get to talk about this. Rate the GOP's performance at these Planned Parenthood hearings that they've had over the last couple of days.
D, and that's being very, very charitable. Did it advance the narrative that might result in the defunding of Planned Parenthood? No, not at all. So it was a failure. And all I think they should have been doing is just showing clips from the videos. Just again and again, just say, respond to this one. Okay, how about this one? Hey, what do you think of this? Just play them. Nobody wants to show them, and that's what, when the media is attacking Carly Fiorina for, quote-unquote, lying about what's in the videos, she should just walk into the studio with an iPad and say, hey, I have the footage right here. Want to watch? And when the reporter tries to tackle her and throws the iPad across the room, I think that'll get the message across better than a bunch of GOP representatives just hectoring yes, she's loathsome, Cecile Richards, but they just look like politicians and like buffoons. Get out of the way of the story. Instead, they want, a good little clip that they can send out in their fundraising email. So they did not cover themselves in glory, but I certainly didn't expect them to.
So, Caleb, there have been, in spite of what I think was in fact a legitimately terrible performance by the GOP in these hearings, there have been a couple of kind of bright spot advertisements, not advertisements, videos that have come out. There was a great one that Live Action, I saw Live Action tweeted out about Planned Parenthood doesn't do mammograms, and it had various people claiming that they did mammograms, then Cecile Richards admitting they don't have mammogram machines, they never claimed they did mammograms. And then there were a couple of others. Were there any kind of buzzworthy, internet clips or videos that have come out? And what would you think was the best that you've seen as a result of these
No, there
hearings.
weren't enough, and that's exactly what I was going to say in response to John. I don't think that the fault lies with the people who are asking the questions. The fault lies with people like us, people that are supposed to push the narrative. Do you think the Democrats did a good job while they were in there? They were idiots. They were. Who was that one guy? Connolly was embarrassing. His rant was ridiculous. Any average person who saw that rant would be appalled at that guy's behavior in that. And we're the ones who aren't clipping these properly, aren't putting them out online. The Democrats go and they make good propaganda from what their idiot politicians say. The difference between them and us is they think their politicians are idiots and they make up for it by carrying water for them, and we think our politicians are idiots and we spend our time bashing them.
I think the reason it was a failure was Caleb Howe. I'm amending my remarks.
Disagree. No. Yes, yesterday we made explicitly clear every single Mulvaney, the guy who is fundraising off of trying to shut down the government. Mulvaney is sitting there opening his line of questioning by saying, "I'm not here to talk about the videos," and you have Chaffetz not talking about the videos. The only people who talked about the videos were the Democrats. Jim Jordan referenced only the first video in terms of, hey, why'd you apologize for this? Which made it exceedingly clear that the only people who had actually watched the videos were Elijah Cummings and the Democrats, because they got to cherry pick everything. I guarantee you these guys, they came in unprepared. They wanted to argue spreadsheets while the Democrats were arguing morality. And when you are arguing spreadsheets, you're going to lose every single time.
Well, that's also bad advice.
They had 2 months. They had 2 months to make this count and make the media talk about it, and instead they got embarrassed because they didn't do their homework. They didn't pursue lines of questioning that would make people talk about the videos.
And they
Jay Caruso had the best summation of it, which was Carly Fiorina did more in 10 seconds at a debate than this entire panel did in 6 hours, because this panel didn't want to talk about the videos. They sounded evasive when the videos were brought up. You had Jason Chaffetz going, "Oh yeah, well, we have the videos in a safe somewhere, and we're not going to talk about them."
Why didn't they want to talk about it? Who did they hear from in D.C.? They hear from the people that you and I see every day on Twitter saying, "Oh, well, you social conservatives pushing this abortion line, you're really hurting our chances in the general election." They're listening to those people. And so when they go into an abortion hearing, instead of talking about abortion, they talk about, well, you're wasting taxpayer money on big salaries, because they think that's the safe ground to go to, because they listen to the establishment idiots in D.C.
Right, Caleb, Bill, let me put a bow on this by simply saying what I just said in the comments. Ask yourself the last time a congressional hearing ever accomplished anything at all. I mean, outside of the Watergate Commission and Richard Nixon nailing Alger Hiss is the last time anything ever friggin' happened in a congressional hearing that mattered. This is all kabuki theater.
The Benghazi hearings revealed that Hillary used a private email server.
Well, yeah, okay, actually that is a pretty good counter.
Subpoenas.
But that wasn't the hearing itself. That was just like
that was the subpoenas.
Exactly, that was the subpoena.
Fair distinction.
And these guys, they had a chance. The media's buried this. Now the media is all watching this committee hearing, and instead of talking about the videos, which the media would have to talk about and show in their little prepackaged, highly edited clips, they chose not to talk about it. They chose to talk about salary levels and Congo and mammograms.
Hold on. Weren't you just saying they're not going to show things? Weren't you just saying about Hillary that they're not going to show things they don't want to show? That once they coalesce behind Hillary Clinton, they're going to stop talking about the emails? They're not going to show it even if they do talk about it.
But inevitably they would have to, in the course of a hearing, if they're going to report on it and they're going to talk about how Cecile Richards knocked it out of the park, they would have to actually show the context of the questions.
Wait a second.
If I could jump in there for a second, just on what Bill is saying. Now, Caleb, back to your thing. I'm not sure if I know anyone personally or have heard anyone who suggested that they should avoid the videos and focus on the fiscal issue of that. And even if that is the case,
said it in when the floor was ceded to Mulvaney said, "No, we're not here to talk about the videos." Jason Chaffetz said,
I'm responding to the claim that they were
taxpayer money.
Right, I'm responding to the claim that they were doing that on the advice of Beltway insiders or something. My point, though, is even if that was the advice, they, through 6 hours, never adjusted their strategy, even though they must have realized from their aides and everybody else who was communicating with them is that they were laying a giant egg. They were not only not defending the videos, like you were saying, Democrats were given every chance in the world to tear them apart, which they did. And not just that, Cecil Richards was handed how many different chances to grandstand, which she took, and then they never came back with anything. I mean, even if they had bad advice, I think the final thing that we saw from this entire hearing is that the guys that they put up there were not even the A side, certainly not the B side, not even the C side. This was like F-string politicians that got thrown up there who had 2 months to prepare for this damn thing. That's what I'm saying.
Chaffetz's performance in this hearing was nearly the worst thing I've ever seen from a person who's elected to Congress. And I've watched Elijah Cummings.
It almost made me glad that the Secret Service tried to leak his.
It really did. It really did.
Exactly.
It really did.
So my only point is that even if they went in there with the advice that let's focus on the fiscal issues, it amazes me that after hour 4 they didn't realize, holy shit, this isn't working, guys. Maybe let's talk about the very reason we're even having this stupid hearing.
Yeah, and that's my point. Is to both Jeff and Bill. Is look, nobody, at least I didn't expect that we're going to walk out of this hearing with like some congressional resolution condemning Planned Parenthood, or Cecile Richards is not going to admit on the stand, yeah, we sold baby parts for money. But look, why don't people understand how the fucking game is played? Why does nobody understand that anymore? You guys at the Washington Free Beacon understood. You put together a montage of Democrats admitting they'd never seen the video. Why did no Republican go around and ask, you're in this committee. Have you watched the videos? Did you see the videos? Just get them
because
on record.
Because they hadn't watched the videos either.
I think Bill's right. I think they watched the videos. I don't think Chaffetz has seen them.
Yeah, these people clearly didn't do that work.
And I look, the last time I can remember,
Chaffetz was busy watching, on repeat, his cameo appearance in How the Grinch Stole Christmas. He was too busy doing that.
I gotta say, I still say, it doesn't seem to me they went in there to have a hearing about the videos in the first place. They went in there to have a hearing about whether or not Planned Parenthood was being responsible with the money they were being given by the government. And that's exactly what they did for 6 hours in a shitty, terrible way.
Which nobody gives a shit about.
I mean, this is the thing, is the issue that polls the best is banning third trimester abortion. 80% want to do that. The second best one is taxpayer funding of abortion. So they obviously went in there and they were like, we don't want to have a war on woman narrative, so we'll just focus on trying to basically make a secondary allegation that money is fungible. So we're having taxpayer-funded abortion, and they didn't want to try to make the moral argument because they thought it would advance the war on women. Instead of bring to the average American voter who hasn't seen the videos, just like the average congressman hasn't, they didn't want to cross a line and be seeming to make a moral argument. But the second you see the moral ground, please tell me what President Romney thinks about what it's like when your opponent defines you early.
I'm not saying
the Democrats define. Oh no, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the Republican strategy was just, hey, we'll focus on this taxpayer thing since that poll's popularly. And what the Democrats did is they went out there right away. Cecile Richards, I have her advanced copy of her speech. Her opening statement was all about taxpayer funding and how they're good stewards of taxpayer dollars. After the first paragraph, she completely scrapped it and addressed only how highly edited these videos were. Democrats right away were like, if we can define what these videos are, nobody is going to actually watch them. And the Republicans didn't try to fight this. The Republicans argued fiscal stuff.
Yeah,
and we all lost.
They don't actually want it defunded because then they lose votes. Is that why?
Well, we don't actually have polling on this question, at least not that I'm aware of. But I'd be willing to bet that you shouldn't sell aborted baby parts for money. Probably polls pretty well. And also, if you're going to do it, you should obtain informed consent. Would also poll pretty well, probably well above the 80%. John, we haven't heard from you in a while. What is your take on all this that we've been discussing here? Jump into the fray.
Well, I think it's kind of strange how the Republicans in Congress, how incredibly gun-shy they are about anything. They're scared of their own shadow. We saw that with Boehner, and that's why he's stepping down. But again, as has been said earlier, they're just so terrified of the war on women narrative, instead of saying, hey, Planned Parenthood, you're abusing women, and we are not spending our tax dollars to help you abuse women. You are selling baby parts without telling them, without getting informed consent. And that's, again, yeah, it's like all of us are complaining. They don't know how to play the game, and I don't understand how they can be in Washington that long and not get how this is played. It's just maddening. So another opportunity just lost with this. I think the videos will continue to bubble up from below, but we can't expect Republican politicians to advance the narrative at all.
I think, just if I could dovetail off that real quick, what John was saying, I think it's worse than just a missed opportunity. I think this hearing will now forever be used against CMP and anybody that they're trying to convince. People will point to this hearing and say, guys, look, there were 6 hours and they got shit. In fact, they looked stupid. She looked on point. Listen to this great thing she said, and she proved that the videos were nonsense and they didn't fight her. Guys, there's nothing here. That's the end of it. The CMP story is over.
I donated to Planned Parenthood after this video because I was just like, wow, Cecile Richards just seems so reasonable.
And I think that Becket is right. I think that, and it's amazing to me how bad the Republicans in Congress are. Just this entire issue. And you know, we'll remember we talked about this, I think, on one of the very first episodes of this show. You know, the late-term abortion ban that came up, which is another issue, as Bill pointed out, that polls extraordinarily well. Has something like 65% support in the general public. And we screwed the pooch on that royally. We made it into an issue where it looked like we were the extremists instead of the Democrats. And I think that the only explanation for it is, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is that the people that we send to Washington, D.C. who claim that they're pro-life really aren't. Because if they were, and they had a bone of conviction in their body, you know, they would have some understanding about how to talk about these issues in some way. They would have some level of study to where they could communicate with ordinary people in a way that matters. Instead, they're just trying to fake it, and they're doing a terrible job. So let's move on. I want to try to get to a couple of other issues before we have to let Becket go. He's got another appointment at 10, and we want to let him get to that. He may have to drop off early. But I want to talk a little bit about the kind of surprising and unexpected resignation of John Boehner and the expected leadership battle that's going to occur in the GOP. John, what do you think? Is there any chance at all that anybody besides Kevin McCarthy becomes the Speaker of the House as a replacement for Boehner?
No. That's my long answer? No. McCarthy's got it. And despite his messing up on the Benghazi hearing and saying how it's hurting Hillary's polling, nobody else really has a fire in the belly to get this position. I don't think anybody really wants it, especially everybody's just kind of sitting around waiting for the next president anyway. Nobody wants to jump out there a year early.
Poisoned
So I think
chalice.
McCarthy's got it if he wants it.
Poisoned chalice. No one wants the cup.
Yeah. I think that's probably right. I think that the people who would have been credible challengers like Jim Jordan passing on it indicates that probably McCarthy is going to be allowed to occupy the chair until after the next election without a relatively serious contest. To me, and we're going to go to Becket here, maybe his last question that he gets to answer. To me, I think that the best possible result from my own personal standpoint is that somebody stops McMorris Rogers from moving up in the food chain. What are the chances of that happening, of Price or somebody else taking the majority leader's chair, do you think?
I agree with John. I think it's real slim. I think one of the few things that Republicans adhere to and do so pretty faithfully without failure is paying attention to the pecking order. McCarthy's next in line. There's a sort of he's earned it attitude, and people don't like to upset that apple cart. You make enemies, and it makes things ugly. I think if he wants it, he takes it, and I think if Webster might put up a decent opposition, but in the end, I think this is all just talk. I think it's McCarthy's to take.
What do you think about the race for majority leader?
Well, I will have to admit I haven't actually watched that one closely enough, and I can't give an informed opinion.
All right,
That's not a political answer.
Hey, easy, Ben Carson. I don't know anything about this.
I admit it.
But I know for a fact that there are two things that should elect Price. One is that
It's not McMorris Rogers.
No McMorris should be trusted with power. Can you ever see these people? They're friggin' ridiculous. And number two, she's a woman. Gross.
That's she's also objectively terrible at her job. But
no, she was great at the McDonald's cashier job that she had when she tweeted that out on a Throwback Thursday.
Not so much her job of being a Republican in Congress who stands for much of anything.
Well, I mean, you know what? This is my thing, and McMorris Rogers comes from a relatively kind of safe district that one round of redistricting could just obliterate. Right,
and she lives in a state where that's highly likely to happen to her if she raises her profile.
Exactly. So the one argument to be made, and I really like Tom Price, great on labor issues, which is my regular beat. But the only worry I could see from establishment Republicans would be, we kept it as a feather in our cap when we got rid of Daschle, when he was the Senate Democratic leader. And Rogers could it's a very real possibility that her district could be messed with in such a way that she could end up losing her seat while holding a senior level position. So I think that's a real worry that we should have as a party, and people should be talking to her basically saying, hey, it's not you, it's your state.
Yeah, I think, and I think that the main appeal that would counter that is that the Republican caucus is going to want to probably have an overwhelming urge to put a woman in that position. Quite frankly, in spite of all the merit that Price has over her substantively. So let's move on, and I want to talk a little bit about we've been talking about the problems that the Republicans have. The Democrats are not without their own problems, in particular in Pennsylvania right now. They've got this Attorney General down there, and I'm going to give Jeff a chance to chime in on this first. They've got an Attorney General in Pennsylvania who is now under, I guess, her second indictment. And has lost her. An Attorney General, ladies and gentlemen, who has lost her license to practice law, has been suspended by the Philadelphia Bar. She can no longer legally perform the job to which she is elected, but is clinging tenaciously to her job and refusing to resign. Jeff, tell us a little bit about this scandal, and what do you think, if at all, this portends for the chances of Toomey's election in the upcoming election? Do you think this is going to have spillover effects in the Pennsylvania election?
Well, the woman's name is Kathleen Kane, and she was the first ever Democrat, and I believe the first ever female as well, elected to the position of Attorney General in Pennsylvania. To be clear, though, the position of AG in the state wasn't an elective position, I believe, until like 1990 or so. But Democrats had never held this position prior to 2012, and she's actually a fairly attractive person. She's photogenic. People thought she was going to be a huge rising star, but then she got involved with a little bit of perjury and a little bit of crime. She was found to have been quite likely. There's obviously been no verdict on these cases yet, but what it seems that she did is that she got into a really angry beef with people in her office and leaked grand jury testimony about an ongoing case where there was criminal prosecutions of local Philadelphia politicians, and she declined to prosecute them as a Democrat because there's obviously a little bit of like, yeah, we're not gonna go after those of our own. There was a little bit of retaliatory leaking. She took offense to that, started leaking to the media about it. It came back on her, and she has now basically hit full freakout. She has been literally charged with, I believe, 2 counts of perjury, a count of several misdemeanor counts of obstruction of justice, a count of leaking grand jury testimony. She has, you said, had her law license suspended, and the most important thing of all is she is refusing to resign, which I am so grateful for. It is the most wonderful thing in the world when somebody who is faced with these things does not do the honorable thing and hangs on by their white knuckles. Is it going to help Pat Toomey? I don't think it's going to really affect Toomey's status in the race. Toomey's status in winning re-election in Pennsylvania, he's in a very good position to do that, is governed mostly by the fact that he has weak opponents. If Joe Sestak wins, then it's a done deal. If McGinty, who is, I think, Tom Wolf's ex-chief of staff in Pennsylvania, wins, he is still well-positioned to win. He's done a really good job in keeping his brand very bipartisan in that state. But on a down-ticket level, this is terrible because this is only one of a number of scandals that have really embroiled the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. They had their their treasurer or their comptroller, just like 2 weeks ago, pled guilty to a bribery scandal. Nothing is going right for the party in this state, except for the fact that they turned Tom Corbett out of office a couple of years ago.
Jeff,
this sounds like Bill Clinton's resume.
So
Convicted of perjury, doesn't have enough honor to resign. If anything, she should be speaking at the DNC.
So listen, so Bill brings up a valid point, and it's the main reason why I have to give your recounting of this particular Trail of Tears an F, Jeff, because you left out the most salient point, which is why she is unlikely to survive even this scandal, which is that when she was called before the grand jury herself to testify about what she had allegedly done.
I'm so sorry for leaving this out. Yes, go, tell them.
Instead of appearing herself, she sent her twin sister to testify in her place, which is literally the most incredible thing.
It's amazing! You couldn't script this shit! A twin sister who looks just like her, or at least close enough. Why? How?
That was my favorite episode of Night Court right there. Great plotline.
It's even more incredible than sending your twin sister to take the SAT for you. Hey, I got this grand jury testimony. I don't want to do it. I'm afraid I'm going to fail. You go. How did she convince the twin sister to do this?
How did the twin sister swear in? That's the whole thing. At the beginning of the fucking grand jury, you've got to swear that you are who you say you are. I mean, she put her sister in legal jeopardy too, which is the most amazing thing about this. Oh God, it's such a wonderful story, and I hope it never ends.
All right.
And I have to say that I liked her quote that must have freaked out the Democratic Party in that state. You can arrest me 2 times, you can arrest me 10 times, but I will not stop until the truth comes out. I'm sure any down-ticket Democrats needed a change of underwear after that statement.
My goodness. Well, we are over time for tonight, and
hold on. Can I just add one thing real quick?
It better not be about the Mets.
There was a man. His name was Leon. It was his birthday. No one cared.
Thank you, Bill. My birthday was technically yesterday, but thank you very much. I appreciate your non-acknowledgement of it. Was that another poem from Mr. Brent Cochran, or did you come up with that one all on your own?
No. I hate free verse, but yeah, that was Brent.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate it, buddy.
So what are you now? You're like Baldy 9?
Exactly. Baldy 8, thank you very much. All right, guys. We're out of time. We're going to cut this off. Thank you all very much for joining us. I want to thank my panel for their time. Thanks, Becket Adams, who had to run to another interview. Thanks, F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon. Thank you, Jeff Blehar of the Ace of Spades Decision Desk. Thank you, Caleb, for filling in for Aaron and Scott at the same time. You get double the pay. 2 times 0. That's what you get today. Thanks a lot, buddy. And thanks a lot to Jon Gabriel for joining us and taking time out of your Thursday evening, again, for absolutely no compensation whatsoever. And best of luck in your new job at Ricochet.
Thank you.
Thank you all, the audience, for being with us, and we'll hope you'll join us next week on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends.